Namaste. Good morning to those of you joining from the Indian subcontinent, and good evening to those joining from the western part of the world. Welcome to day 22 of the Global Festival of Oneness, celebrating the life and works of Jagat Guru Sri Adi Shankara. It's been phenomenal to hear from so many different scholars, Swaminis, Swamijis, MBA school professors, and engineers, Supreme Court advocates. It's just unbelievable the kinds of perspectives we were able to bring to you through this Advaita Academy's month-long celebration of Adi Shankara. Every day we have two sessions, one session in the morning at 6 o'clock Indian Standard Time, 6 a.m., and one at 6:30 p.m. IST. Today we have the pleasure of listening to Sri Kalyan Kumar ji, who is going to be speaking, answering a very important question. Is Shankara a revolutionary or conformist? I envisioned this festival with the thought that Shankara is actually a revolutionary entrepreneur. He's a leader, change maker, because as an entrepreneur, I know how difficult a mission can be. And I'm looking forward to hearing your perspectives about Shankara. A brief background about Kalyan Kumar ji. We had the opportunity to learn just before this presentation that he actually lives in San Diego, but currently locked down in India. So I'm so glad he's able to join in spite of this situation. Kalyan Kumar ji is a Shishya of Pujya Swami Dayananda Saraswati ji and has undergone a 3-year residential Vedanta course with Pujya Swami ji at Arsha Vidya Gurukulam in Anaikatti, Coimbatore. He's an alumnus of IIT BHU Varanasi. Kalyan Kumar has graduated as an engineer and was working in India and now in the USA as a software engineer. Again, throughout this festival, sir, we have heard so many engineers, practicing software professionals from IBM and other companies. And today we have the pleasure of hearing from you working at Cognizant. So please bring us that practical aspect. It doesn't, to practice Advaita Vedanta, you don't have to be in a forest or an ashram. You can create an ashram around you, regardless of wherever you are, right? So that's another example that we want to highlight. A student of Ramakrishna Mission since early age, Kalyan Kumar was inspired by teachings of Swami Vivekananda and Ramakrishna Paramahamsa from a very young age. And during his 4 years of stay at Varanasi, he was part of a student spiritual group called Vivekananda Nidhi, through which he came in contact with gurus from sampradayas like Avadhuta Sampradaya, Shakta Sampradaya, Aurobindo Yoga, etc. Pujya Swamiji asked Kalyan Kumar and his Guru Bhai Jaishankar ji to buy some land in rural area and build a Gurukulam. And I believe as a tribute to his Guru, Kalyan Kumar ji, along with Jaishankar ji and Sri Vidya ji, is now building an Arsha Vidya Varshini Gurukulam at Dakshinamurti Sarovar, Kerkupappan in Tirunelveli district. So in fact, it may be good that you're locked down now so you can actually get this ashram work done. So Kalyan Kumar ji plans to teach Vedanta and Sanskrit primarily for adults, but also have plans to run yoga camps, children camps, and he's now currently conducting online classes on Vedanta and Bhagavad Gita. So Kalyan Kumar ji, it's an honor to have you on our festival. Thank you so much for taking your valuable time. We're looking forward to your presentation today. You may start with an opening prayer and then continue with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. So I was briefly talking about how we are not qualified to pass judgments on Acharya. Now, when it comes to this revolutionary versus conformist points of view, like I mentioned, we are picking it up because there are some views which are spread in the public forums and in the public domain that Acharya is a revolutionary. That is one point of view. And what they quote are typically from Shankara's life stories. In fact, I read one quote which says Shankaracharya had been adjudged as a revolutionary who questioned the illogicity of customary practices of rituals and morals of his times by the experts in Indology and all that. So essentially, the point of view is Shankara is a revolutionary because he questioned the rituals. Now, how true is the stated position that Shankara actually questioned rituals? We need to see. Then they talk about, hey, Shankara actually negated the Varnashrama Dharma by composing shlokas like Manisha Panchakam. Right? So when people talk about revolution, the premise is there is something bad in the society and somebody comes and changes it, right? Involving or causing a complete or dramatic change or change in fundamental way the society functions, which is fine. But the basic premise or basic assumption here is there is something wrong with the Varnashrama Dharma. There is something wrong with the way the society was functioning. Again, those are points of view taken from where we stand today, right? So there is a point of view today in the society that certain things are good, certain things are bad. That would have been little different 200 years back. That will be very different probably 200 years later, right? So people make judgments based on where they stand today. That's number one. Second is, we are picking up isolated cases of some shloka here and there and some points of view, right? Based on some stories. And like I said, there are 14 different stories. I mean, the Shankara Vijayas that are there, and they all have variants of the Shankara's life stories, right? So those are becoming a basis for people to conclude that he is a revolutionary and he changed certain wrongs in the society. Okay. But a revolutionary can also bring in certain positive changes, right? So obviously we have to look at Shankara from that perspective as well to see if there has been positive changes as well, right? So those are like 2-3 things we need to evaluate. We'll come to some of the details. I just want to define the frame here. So that's number one on the revolutionary. And then there are views about him being conformist, right? Because Shankara is a proponent of Shruti Pramanyam. Now that means he advocated that Veda is pramana for things, and hence he is branded as a conformist. There is again a left intellectual view who say that he is a conservative idealist and a reactionary who tried to move the society to the reverse order. Okay, that is another view because he is a conformist and he just was a dogmatic person, right? So these are kind of views which are picked up based on their own perspective of what Shankara was and rooted on certain publicly available stories and perceptions on what Shankara did. Like, you know, he did the cremation of his mother despite being a sannyasi, and a lot of things that is picked up and then conclusions are made. Now, like I told at the beginning of the talk, we would base our views on Acharya entirely from his works, which are the Prasthanatraya Bhashyas, the Dasa Upanishads Bhashya, the Bhagavad Gita Bhashya, and the Brahma Sutra Bhashya, because those are the core works of Acharya, and rest of it are, you know, around these, and some are, you know, are debated whether they were originally done by Acharya or not. Okay, so we wouldn't, I mean, we are not dismissing or authenticating. We just are leaving that aside and basing it on Acharya's work, which is the core, which is the Bhashya. Now let's look at when people say Shankara is a revolutionary, right? So what are the key things that they attribute? Number one, they say he questioned illogicality of rituals. Number two, they say he dismissed materialism and pushed frugality. Like he didn't want people to earn wealth, and, you know, so he pushed a sannyasa or a celibate kind of thing, and he was the one who created the sannyasa lifestyle and those kind of things. So that's second. The third, they say he brought in, I read somewhere that he brought in a new thesis of unity of Atman and Nirguna Brahman. Okay, and they say that he he advanced this thesis by writing commentaries on the Upanishads and others to support his thesis. Okay, so it is as though he was the one who theorized this concept of Atma and Nirguna Brahman. So that is another revolutionary claim. And then finally, there is also another view that Shankara even questioned scriptures, and he emphasized on direct experience over the Shruti Pramana. Again, that is considered as a revolutionary thing. Now, I mean, are these all factually correct? I think that's the question that we need to address. So when people talk about, these kind of views, I remember this age-old story of, some 7 blind men looking at an elephant, right? One person looks at the belly portion and then it says, elephant is like a wall. Another one touches the leg and then he says, elephant is like a pillar. And another one, says elephant is like a snake. And the next guy says, no, elephant is like a fan. So it all depends on what are they touching, right? So again, when people are talking about Shankara's, passing judgments on Shankara, they are looking at an aspect of what he said. Let's look at some examples and then see how Shankara approaches a few things, right? Number one, the first contention that Bhagavad Pada actually opposed Vedic rituals. I'll quote from Taittiriya Upanishad Bhashya, where he actually picks up this Tasya Yajureva Shiraha. So Yajurveda is like the head of the Vedas. Okay, so that is a statement as part of a Upasana in Taittiriya Upanishad. There is a statement. So here Bhashikara says, Tasya Siratvam Pradhanyat Pradhanyam cha Yagadau Sannipatya Upakarakatvat Yajushahi Havirdiyate Swaha Karadina. This is the statement he says. Okay, and then he goes on. So basically what he is saying is, Yajurveda is considered the predominant one amongst Vedas because Yagadau Sannipatya Upakarakatvat. Yajurveda is the one which is standing in the front when someone is performing the ritual. So Yajushahi Havirdiyate Swaha Karadina. So when you say Swaha and do a Havirdanam, it is done using the Yajur mantra. So this is not, Upanishad is not directly saying why Yajurveda is Pradhana. It's Shankara who is giving explanation as to why Yajurveda is considered as the Pradhana. And is attributing it to, not because it has some Vedanta Vakya or Jiva Brahma Aikya Vakya. That is not what he is emphasizing. He is emphasizing that in rituals it is standing in the front. So that means the statement that Shankara dismissed rituals as something which is demeaning or something is completely ruled out, because why would he praise a ritual if that is what he meant? It is a fact that Mimamsa Vada was dismissed by him. That's a very different point, because Mimamsakas not just said that rituals are important, but they said that rituals alone give you moksha. You don't need Ishvara, you don't have a Brahman, you don't need to have Brahma Sakshatkara, all that. Now that is a contention in terms of what is Satyam and what is Mithya and what is Moksha. So Shankara argues on that, not the validity of rituals, right? So that is not a very valid argument on their part. In fact, in another place, when he's talking about Avahanti, again he emphasizes how the Homartha Mantra Jnapanam, he talks elaborately in terms of how in Avanti Homa things are, the benefits accrue. And I'll give you one other interesting example where There is a statement of Sri Kama, somebody who is seeking wealth. In the context of Brahma Vidya, this comes. Somebody seeks wealth, and for that there is a mantra. Okay, there is a mantra for wealth seekers. Shankara doesn't dismiss saying that, hey, the rituals won't give you wealth. In fact, he says, Sri Kamaha asmin vidya prakarane abhidiyamanaha dhanarthaha dhanam cha karmartham karma cha upatta duritakshayartham tatkshaye hi vidya prakashate tata cha smritihi jnanamutpadyate pumsam kshayat papasya karmanaha yata darshatale prakye pashyati atmanam atmani. What he says, the context, he says, the context of this Sri Kamatvam is within the topic of Vidya. So we are talking about it in the context of Brahma Vidya. Therefore, this ritual is to be used to obtain wealth, so that the wealth can be used to do other Vaidika karmas, dhanam cha karmartham, karma cha upatta duritakshayartham. By doing those karma, one gains antakarana shuddhi or purification, takshaye cha vidya prakashate, and once purified, the person gains knowledge. So you have to see that there are 2-3 important conclusions here. Number one, he doesn't dismiss that a ritual will give you wealth. He doesn't say that, hey, doing a ritual is not going to give you wealth. So that means he's not dismissing ritual. That's number one. Second, he also promotes karma by saying that wealth has to be used to perform ritual, so that the ritual can help purify you, and thereby you can gain Brahma Vidya. So the statement that Shankara dismisses ritual is number one, falsified. Second, Shankara advocates frugality is also not true, because here he is saying go for wealth by all means, nothing wrong with it, but use it in the right way, right? So that is what he does. But does that mean he completely subscribes to karma? That is not the case. In fact, one of the quotes again I want to bring in, Kamya pratisiddhayoho anarambat arabdasya cha upabhogena kshayat nityanushtane cha pratyavaya bhavat ayatnataha eva swatmani avasthanam mokshaha. So there is one Purva Pakshi who comes, I don't want to go too much into detail, but one of the opposition of Shankara was to say that, why can't you say karma itself can give moksha? By just doing karma, you can get away with prarabdha, sanchita and agamya punya papa, and thereby you get purified and attain moksha. And he dismisses that. Now, does that mean he dismisses karma? That is not the case. What he dismisses is karma being a direct means for moksha, is what he dismisses. So, dismissing a karma as a direct means for moksha or dismissing a mimamsa doesn't mean that Shankara is dismissing rituals. That's number one. So we also discussed about how Shankara didn't advocate frugality or anything, right? There is another very interesting aspect about Shankara is that his approach is extremely pragmatic. In fact, though we just saw about bhakti and how Acharya speaks about different kinds of bhakti, but when it comes to certain aspects of what is Ishvara and what is Brahman and all that, his view was very true to what Shastra says. Here in Bhagavad Gita, where avinasitu tadvidhi yena sarvam idam tatam vinasham abhyayasyasya nakaschit kartumarhati, there is one shloka which is there in 2nd chapter. It says nothing can destroy your swarupa. Okay, your Atma or Brahma Swarupa cannot be destroyed by anything. So he goes by Pratama Malla Nyaya and says, Kaschit Atmanam Vinasayatum Shaknoti Ishvaraha api. Even Ishvara, the all-pervading Lord, cannot do any harm to the Atma Swarupa. This is a very bold statement, right? There is a fact to it, because Ishvara's Atma Swarupa also is Brahman. So a karyam cannot touch the karana. Okay, that is the idea. But to show that he is making such a bold statement. So if you have to consider Shankara as revolutionary, probably we have to consider these kind of aspects where he could even touch things which often could, put people off. In fact, some of the other Sampradaya Acharyas, apparently originally studied Advaita Vedanta and later on became a Visishtadvaiti or Dvaitin because they couldn't stand these kind of statements which falsifies not just Jiva but even Ishvara. Now, that was very bold. I mean, it is true to the Shastra, there is no doubt. But the way Shankara brought forth those facts were very forceful. That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's not that he created those kind of thoughts, but it is true to what the Shastra says. Because na kaschit kartum arhati, if Bhagavan says, and that kaschit has to include Ishvara also, right? So there is, I mean, that then only it can, nobody can do it. Means what? It has to include Ishvara also. You can't keep one person aside in that. Okay. Similarly, very practical, right? In one of these statements, Tasmad Yudhyasva Bharata, there is one statement. Typically, most of the acharyas will say Krishna pushed Arjuna to do Yuddha, right? But Shankara doesn't say that. He says, Nahi atra Yuddha kartavyata vidhiyate. Yuddhe pravrittaha eva hi asau. Shokamoha pratibadhaha tushnimaste tasya kartavya pratibandha apanayana matram bhagavata kriyate. Tasmad Yudhyasva iti anuvadamatram na vidhihi. He says it is not a rule. He is not saying you have to do Yuddham. That is not what Bhagavan is saying. What he says is, what Acharya says, Bhagavan is saying is, Arjuna is already in Yuddha mode because he finds that as the Dharma. But because of Shoka Moha, whatever he has to do, he is moving away from. To clarify that the reason for him to move away is not a valid reason is what he is emphasizing. This is how Acharya looks at it. He says, even though Bhagavan is saying Yudhyasva, he says Bhagavan is not pushing him to do Yuddha. So that again is, so that's where I'm arriving at. It is, he is very practical in terms of how he looks at it. Like another very important thing, right? Shruti Pramanyam. Generally, most of the acharyas who are commenting on Vedanta Shastra, in all the darshanakaras who are Vaidika Darshana, people who are aligned to Veda as a pramana, will shy away from questioning pramana in certain cases, right? Because Shruti is a pramana. But there are things, when things are impractical, not in what Shastra is saying, in how things are being interpreted, he completely questions it. For example, I'll give one example here. Again, quoting from an Upanishad, Arabhyasya anityatvat iti uktaha doshaha vachanat arabhyaha api nityaha eva iti chet. There is a question that since Veda is saying a moksha will start in time, so why can't you take a nitya moksha starts in time? Okay, nitya moksha is starting in time. Why can't we take Veda as a proof to say that moksha, which is nityam, can start in time? That is the question. Bhashikara answers, Jnapakatvat vachanasya vachanam nama yathabhutasya arthasya jnapakam na avidyamanasya kartru nahi vachana shatenapi nityam arabhyate arabdham va avinashi bhavet. He says, you bring hundreds of Shrutis, it doesn't matter. An eternal thing cannot start in time. Eternal has to transcend time. Eternal cannot start in time. Like in Christianity, they say you go to eternal heaven if you believe in somebody, right? How can eternal start in time? So he explicitly questions it. Vachana shatenapi na nityam arabhyate arabdham va avinashi bhavet. Once something is starting in time, you cannot say it is eternal because that which starts in time has to end in time. So you can bring, the point here is na vachana satenapi. You can bring in thousands of Vedanta Vakyas there, but you cannot interpret it in a way to say that eternal starts in time because it is against the direct perception or logic. So Shruti, Yukti, Anumana, all three have to be justified here, right? So if it is, if your Yukti is not aligned, then you have to relook at what Shruti is trying to say. So you have to understand it in a way that it doesn't interfere with the reality that you are perceiving. Correct? So Shruti Pramanyam is accepted, but he makes a statement when people are not interpreting it correctly, right? Similarly, na jayate iti ityadi shastropadesha anarthakyam. So yeah, this is a very important thing, right? Does that mean Shankara is not aligned to Shruti Pramanyam? That is not the case. This is the Bhagavad Gita Bhashya. He says, at number of places he goes into this, right? If you, so when opposing point of view comes, Shankara says, if you take this kind of a point of view, then Shastropadesha Anarthakyam or Shastra Anarthakyam, whatever Shastra says will become meaningless. So that means his Bhashya tries to make sure that the commentary is in line with Shastra. The Shastra doesn't become anartha. So that is very important. That means he is giving pramanya. The pramanyam is absolute. Only thing is, if it is interfering with what you are seeing, then you re-question your understanding of Shruti. So you look at it in a new way to make sure that Shruti's Vakya is understood and it doesn't interfere with the reality and the logic of things, right? You can't say eternal and it starts in time. It is illogical. And if you attribute that to Shruti, that means you are saying Shruti is illogical. So we need to understand that Shankara questions not Shruti, but the understanding of what Shruti is saying. Similarly, some revolutionary things that Shankara's works, we can attribute it as revolutionary, but it is again, since Shankara is only explaining the Shastras, so it's his understanding of Shastra is what we should attribute it to, right? Very interesting. Again in Upanishad Bhashya, he says, Sarva bhavanam cha tena avibhakta desha kalatvat kala akashadi karanatvat niratisaya sukshmatvat cha na tasya anyat avigneyam sukshmam vyavahitam viprakrishtam bhutam bhavat bhavishyadva asti. He is talking about what is Brahman, okay? But the most important point here is, he says, Kala Akashadi Karanatvat. The Brahman is the cause of time and space, not just all the objects and matter, but even time and space. So he says time and space are not absolute. This was, the scientists came to this conclusion very recently, not even 50 years, 100 years back, right? But Shankara's latest date that we accept is 800 AD, and the earliest is spoken as somewhere around 500, 600 BC. So even if you assume 1200 years back, he made this statement that time and space are not absolute even at that time. In fact, this Dhyana Sloka of Bhagavad Gita Bhashya is very interesting. He says, Narayanaha Paraha Avyaktat Paraha Andam Avyakta Sambhavam Andaha Andasya Antaha tu ime lokaha Saptadvipa cha Medini. He says from Narayana is above the Avyaktam, the unmanifest, and the unmanifest precedes the Andam, the universe, and within the universe are these galaxies, and within that is this earth, which consists of 7 continents, Saptadvipa cha Medini. And 1200 years back to know that how many islands are there on the earth is something amazing, right? And this is a prayer to Narayana, but he gives that hierarchy, right? So it's Bhagavan to the universe, to galaxies, to the earth, to the continents, right? Within one shloka, he gives that. And Shankara doesn't do like 10 shlokas for each Bhashya, right? It's just one shloka. And within that, he covers the Sarvatmatvam of Bhagavan and then everything, right? It's just one shloka. Then finally, right, I would just talk about one or two things on the conformist versus see, each one of these points is about how do you want to classify, right? Is it revolutionary or conformist, right? It's very difficult because he's just true to Shastra, that's all. Some are can be considered revolutionary, some can be considered as conformist, right? It depends on what lens you use. Now on the sannyasa, right? People say Shankara started sannyasa. So this is a bhashya, slightly long bhashya that that phrase I have taken on Bhagavad Gita, right? Sarva karma manasa sanyasya aste sutam vashi. There's one shloka. So this manasa sanyasya is what is said by Bhagavan in Gita. Okay. So now the question typically comes whether Bhagavan spoke about sannyasa of the mind, or is he talking about physically doing sannyasa, right? That question comes. People say only Shankara brought in this Dasanami sannyasa and then the sannyasa order, all that, right? Again here, look at this bhashya. Nanu manasiti vachanat na vachikanam kayikanam cha sanyasaha iti chetna sarva karmani iti visheshitatvat. So though manasi sarva karmani manasa sanyasya is used, but since the phrase sarva karmani is used, you cannot say the renunciation is only mental, because every action can't be just mental. There are physical actions, there are also vachikam, words spoken. So when Bhagavan says sarva karmani, he couldn't have meant only mental actions. That's how he starts. Then the question comes, manasanam eva sarva karmani karmanam iti chet. Why can't you take that sarva karmanam as an adjective to manasa karma and say all mental actions can be renounced? Why can't you take it like that? Iti question. Bhashyakara answers, manovyapara purvakatvat vakkaya vyaparanam manovyapara abhave tad anupapattehe. So the question was, why is he saying manasa sanyasya, right? Why sarva karmani manasa? Why mental action is spoken, right? If Bhagavan wanted all kind of actions to be stopped, why only mental was stated? So he says every action starts in the mind. Very beautifully he says, whether you are talking about speech, whether you are talking about physical action, the genesis of action is in the mind. So unless in mind you decide to do something, how will you do it? So manovyapara abhave tad anupapatte. Therefore Bhagavan has to say, you first stop it in the mind. Shastriyanam vakkaya karmanam karanani manasani varjayitva anyani sarvakarmani manasa sanyase iti chetna naiva kurvanna karayan iti visheshanat. So then he again, the opposition point of view is, why can't you distinguish between the worldly action and the actions prescribed by Shastra? Why can't you distinguish that and say only one set of actions were asked to be given up? So for that, say Bhagavan's Bhashyakara says, no, the same shloka says, naiva kurvanne na karayanne, not doing, not making others do. So the moment it includes everything, whether it is Shastra karma or Ashastrika karma. So sarva karma sanyasaha ayam bhagavatoktaha marishyataha na jivataha iti chetna navadware puret. So again he goes on, navadware is used, so it's not about dead people, it is about live people. So and then he goes to conclude, nahi sarva karma sanyasena mritasya akurvataha akarayataha dehe sanyasya iti sambandhaha na deha aste iti chenna sarvatra atmanaha avikriyatvat avadharanat asana kriyayascha adhikarana apekshatvat tadanapekshvatcha sanyasasya sampurvasya nyasasabda sya anya. So sanyasa, he explains, basically he is using Bhagavan's shloka to say that Bhagavad Gita is emphasizing on physically, mentally and through words giving up actions, and this action giving up is through jnanam only. But there are slokas. There are many slokas which prove that, like, Veda vinashinam nityam yayena majamavyayam katam sa purushah partha kam ghatayati hantikam. The one who understands what is Brahman, how can he do an action? Is a question Bhagavan asks, right? So one who understands, how can he do an action means what? That means Bhagavan is advocating sannyasa. It's very clear. So Bhashyakara is staying true to the Shastra. That's all. So nothing is revolutionary or conformist. Yeah, I mean, you can say conformist in the sense that he is conforming to what Shastra is saying when he is writing the commentary, right? But should one be a conformist or revolutionary? That question is about what transcends time, right? Whatever Shastra is saying should be applicable to all periods of time. So what is correct today should be correct tomorrow, and it should have been correct yesterday, right? So that is how Shastra looks at things, in what is the hitam for everybody and at every point in time. So a particular society in 2020 cannot make a judgment based on today's social structures. So Shastra is hitakari for everybody at all points in time, right? So the more people align to that, the better for them. It's not about, how do we propagate our dharma. That is not at all the focus here, right? It is what can help people to become better, right? And it is for everybody, right? It's nothing to do with one ashrama, one varna, whatever. So Shastra is for everyone, and that is what Shankara is sticking to. So the common statements that he is a revolutionary, he dismissed varnashrama, he dismissed rituals, or he conformed to something, all that is looking at it from a colored glass. Like I said, the blind man looking at elephant, that is how it's being looked at. So we better try and stick to understand what Shastra says, and that is where, because Veda is a pramana and Sampradaya holds the key to understand the pramana, and Bhashyakara has been the one who has given the key. He is the link. That's why we say Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam. He is the link in the Sampradaya, because of which this whole Sampradaya, Vedanta Sampradaya, has stood the test of time. And any jnani you look at, and people may be using self-realization, they may, universal consciousness, or it doesn't matter. All those people in one way or the other are influenced by the work of Shankara, right? Not just the people who came in the sannyasa parampara, right? Even the modern gurus, whether it is from west or east or wherever, the whole self-realization and what is to be sought, the moksha, liberation, even nirvana kind of things, right? When people talk, you cannot dismiss the influence that Bhagavad Pada's work had in people's life. Many people don't recognize it. Modern gurus may or may not recognize it, may not state it, but it is a fact that the root for all these things is in Shankara's work. So with that, I would like to conclude. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamadachre Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Dhanyavadaha. Namaste, and thank you so much for your wonderful question and answer format presentation that I really enjoyed. And definitely you have actually raised more questions for us to go learn more, because throughout this festival, people have been saying, Shankara has been talking about Shastra Parimana, tradition. So he didn't bring something new, but he's following the tradition. So again, you sort of clarified that he's more a conformist, that okay, this is what Shastra is saying, and I'm essentially providing a better commentary for you. One of the speakers during the talk also said, we call it Einstein's relativity, but relativity was always there. Einstein only put together a structure so we understand. It's like Newton's gravity. Similarly, so there was another speaker that sort of said, Shankara's contribution is so unique because what is there has been presented so beautifully for all of us to understand. And you have done something similar today, helping us understand how to view Shankara's work and his legacy. So we have a couple of questions, Kalyan Kumarji. If one behaves based on one's vasanas, creating actions and further karmas, how does one change and reduce the effect of those vasanas to fast forward to self-realization?
Okay, so there are, so Shankara himself addresses it in many places. So the basic premise for one to gain Atma Jnana is Chitta Shuddhi and Chitta Naischalyam, or what we call as Antakarana Shuddhi and Chitta Naischalyam, right? One, we have to remove the hindrances or obstructions in our mind, right? Everything is in the mind. The whole Mahabharata happens in the mind, right? There is nothing outside. There are only triggers outside. The entire emotion is in the mind. The same object can create one kind of a reaction in one person and another kind of a reaction in another person. So nothing is in the object. It is all in one's mind, right? Now the mind, one's own mind or vasana, as the questioner is using the term, is interfering with one's ability to comprehend one's swarupa. The reason being, your own nature, your ahankara, is very unlikely to give up very easily, because the Vedanta is trying to falsify your individual ego. Falsify as in it is trying to show that your swarupa is Purna Swarupam. And to comprehend that means it is the Atma, the Jiva is trying to give up the passionate things that the person is holding on to. So the vasanas become a hindrance to for one to realize one's swarupa, right? So that is what is called kashaya and vasana, or whatever we want to say. Now this can be addressed in multiple dimensions, because we are talking both about chitta shuddhi and chitta naishalya. So the karma, that is where karma yoga comes into picture, and modern techniques also can be useful, like yogas and asanas, meditation, whatever is, even psychology is good. So Shankara, in fact, one place says, whatever is useful for you to make your antakarana shuddha, you should adopt it, even if it is yoga or whatever. Even though philosophically the Yoga Sutras look at the ultimate reality as something else, they don't align completely to Vedantic vision. But in spite of that, Shankara says, to the extent that it is useful for your antakarana shuddhi and naishalya, use it. Okay, so net, what I would say is, the Shastric view, the traditional view is, you do your Vaidika karma or whatever you are called upon to do, you continue doing the same thing, but change it to a Ishwararpana buddhi and do it. Okay, so do it in a way that when the result comes, you accept it as a Ishwara Prasada. You are not working, you are not doing the action from tomorrow for the sake of the fruits, but you are doing it for Antakarana Shuddhi, and you will be accepting the fruits as Ishwara Prasada. That is one aspect, because the karma binds and you won't be able to suddenly leave karma. So the best way to do karma is, your problem with karma is not karma, but the fruits leaving an imprint on you. Because one day you get the fruit, another day you don't get the fruit, so you will have guilt and hurt, and guilt and hurt compounds and complicates your nature, right? So do your karma in a way that it doesn't further compound it, and also slowly, makes you a better person. So that is the karma yoga. But along with it, whatever meditation and yoga and whatever needs to be done to get your chitta naishalya, you should use all those upakaranas to make sure that you get qualified. So that is how I would look at it. And Shankara also is aligned to the same idea there.
Wonderful, thank you. So even though you have asanas, there are practical methods to be able to overcome the ignorance that could be coming from vasanas, or the arrogance or the shield from the vasanas. You can overcome that through, like what you said. A second question, and we will make the last one. How did Shankara develop these insights? At such a young age, at age 5 and age 7 and age 12, how do we humanistically explain all this?
Yeah, it's a Vishesha Upadhi, right? So I don't think there is any other way to explain. In fact, both Shankara and Vyasa, let me tell you these 2-3 things, right? See, while we can debate if every shloka is done by Shankara or not, whatever, but it is very certain that the Prasthanatraya Bhashyas, whether it is Dasopanishad Bhashya or Bhagavad Gita or Brahma Sutra, they are done by same person, and we have to, that person is Shankara, right? Whoever that was. Now, even to do those kind of Bhashya, it needs a phenomenal intellect, right? And it is a Vishesha Upadhi. So whether we attribute it to a Ishvara Avatara or a person who has come in with a special Upadhi, right? So, but how he got this insight, we have to agree, and Shankara himself also agrees that he is a Sampradaya with, not a Sampradaya Krit. So he didn't create any new Sampradaya. So he accepts that it is, he got it from his Guru. It's he has only written commentaries, and it is not that he himself created this. So he attributes this to his gurus. Okay, so he's part of the lineage Sampradaya, but his intellect definitely is so sharp that the arguments that he advances are, they call it as Prasanna Gambirya. It is both elegant as well as it is rich, right? And simple, right? So so I think that is a special Upadhi. So that's why we look upon Shankara as Ishvara himself, because Shankara means the Shankara's insights, right? So for us, we can have an imagery drawn by Ravi Verma or whatever, but what is Shankara? The collection of his work is Shankara, right? He lives through his works, and that is amazing. I mean, it is not easy to conceive that one individual could have in an age can do something like that. And same holds for Vyasacharya also, right? So I mean, how can someone write a Mahabharata? It's impossible for multiple people to write it also, right? Because the kind of connection and the whole intricacy that is spun into it, it has to be done by one person, and any one brain which has done that, it is unimaginable, right? So
yes,
these are
it's really
Vishesha Upadhi.
incomprehensible.
Yeah.
Hard to comprehend, especially, when I talk to students, I ask them to imagine a world, there are no laptops, no books,
Exactly.
no libraries, and someone to write such a intricate sort of work. Yeah. Adi Shankara, going across the country, still doing bhashyams in an age when there were no any of the tools that we have. So we have no complaints. The overall output of a person is, like you said, a very special Upadhi.
And it's live after 2000 years, right? It is still living.
Still live.
His work. Yeah, that's a great message.
So, which is the reason why we wanted to celebrate this festival, not one day, not 2 days, but a whole month. And now, based on the positive feedback we're getting, we want to continue this festival for much longer time. So, Kalyan Kumarji, I'm sure you'll come back, and please stay engaged with Advaita Academy activities. I hope you're able to reach your hometown San Diego soon safely when the lockdown ends. And thank you so much for actually building an ashram to continue this Sishya Parampara, listening to your own guru, in Dayananda Saraswati ji. Thank you once again for your very enlightening presentation and answering some very important questions at the end. With that, we conclude that day.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's a very noble initiative. So, I mean, no words can be enough. So I think whatever you are doing is very noble, and yeah, please continue this, and may more people benefit from it. And thank you that we could also come and participate in this.
Absolutely. It's all, Jagat Guru Krupa and Shankara Krupa. That's all we can say. Thank you once again. And we now end the session of day 22, session number 1. We'll see you again in about 11 hours at 6:30 p.m. IST on Tuesday, the 19th of May, and followed by a second talk at 7:15 p.m. IST. We have 2 speakers once again. Both are live. So you can be ready with all your questions. Please tell your friends and family. We have the first speaker, Vedanta for Joyful Life by Sri S.K. Jayakumar, and Madhaviya Shankara Digvijaya Sara by Sri Yogananda CS at 7:15 p.m. So thank you once again. We'll see you all soon. Now, please remember, all of these talks are being recorded. They are also available on Facebook Live and YouTube Live, and each individual talk is also being edited and made available as an independent video on YouTube. So Kalyan Kumarji, your video will be edited and also made available, and we'll make sure you get the link. Thank you once again. Have a wonderful evening. and have a wonderful day for those of you from India.